What happens when the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, an empress who has conquered 1,000 worlds and commands the loyalty of billions, comes face to face with someone who looks exactly like the one person she could never forget? In the depths of space, where empires rise and fall like cosmic tides, where alien civilizations span light years and technology bends the very fabric of reality, one human prisoner is about to change everything. Not through weapons or warfare, not through superior technology or cunning strategy, but through something far more profound and unexpected. The Zephyrian Empire has ruled unchallenged for millennia. Their empress, Lyrale, has never known defeat, never shown weakness, never allowed emotion to cloud her judgment. She has seen species rise and fall, witnessed the birth and death of stars, and commanded fleets that could glass entire systems. But she has also known loss, a loss so profound that it shaped her into the iron-willed ruler she became. A loss that taught her that caring meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant weakness she could never afford. Today, in the sterile corridors of her flagship, that lesson is about to be challenged in the most impossible way imaginable. Today, she will discover that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor so cruel and so kind that it defies all logic, all probability, all reason. Today, Empress Lyrale will meet a human named Marcus Chen, and nothing in her empire will ever be the same again. The detention block aboard the ZES Dominion stretched for nearly a kilometer, its polished metal walls reflecting the cold blue light of containment fields. Commander Vextai clicked his mandibles nervously as he approached Cell Block Omega, where the most dangerous prisoners were held. Today's arrival was different from the usual collection of pirates, smugglers, and rebel sympathizers. Today they had captured something that shouldn't exist. A human. The species designation appeared in their databases as Extinct Homeworld Destroyed, last confirmed sighting. 847 standard cycles. Yet here one stood, very much alive, in Containment Cell 7. Marcus Chen sat on the narrow bench that served as both seat and bed, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he stared at his hands. The universal translator implanted behind his ear buzzed occasionally, picking up fragments of alien conversation from the corridor beyond his cell. 3 days since his capture, and he still couldn't quite believe his situation. The mining vessel Prospector's Dream had been his home for 6 months, working the asteroid belts in what the locals called the neutral zone. It was supposed to be safe territory, claimed by no empire, policed by no fleet, perfect for a man trying to disappear from his past. But safety was apparently an illusion when your ship's navigation system failed and you drifted into what the aliens called Imperial space. The Zephyrian patrol had found him floating in an escape pod, his ship's reactor having finally given up its last breath of power. They'd pulled him aboard with the mechanical efficiency of a military operation, and Marcus had expected interrogation, imprisonment, maybe execution. What he hadn't expected was the stunned silence when they first saw his face. The cell door hummed, its energy field dissipating with a sound like air rushing into vacuum. Commander Vextai entered, his reptilian features unreadable but his large eyes fixed intently on Marcus's face. The Zephyrian stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled skin a deep green that shifted to blue under the artificial lights. Despite his imposing size, there was something almost cautious in his approach. "Human Marcus Chen," Vextai spoke, his voice a deep rumble that the translator rendered into perfectly understandable English. "You will come with me. The Empress wishes to see you." Marcus looked up, meeting the alien's gaze without flinching. "The Empress? I'm honored, I guess. Though I have to wonder what the ruler of an empire wants with one lost human." "That is not for me to question," Vextai replied. But Marcus caught the brief flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You will accompany me to the throne chamber. Any attempt to resist will result in immediate pacification." Standing slowly, Marcus stretched muscles that had grown stiff from 3 days of confinement. He was tall for a human, just over 6 feet, with the lean build of someone who'd spent years in variable gravity environments. His dark hair was longer than he usually kept it, and several days of stubble shadowed his jaw. The clothes he wore were standard ship utility wear, practical and unremarkable. As they walked through the corridor, Marcus became aware of the attention he was drawing. Zephyrian crew members stopped their tasks to stare, their large eyes following his every movement. Some whispered in their native tongue, words too rapid and complex for his translator to parse. The atmosphere felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. The throne chamber was a vast space that could have held Marcus's entire mining ship with room to spare. Crystalline formations jutted from the walls at impossible angles, each one pulsing with soft light that seemed to respond to some unseen rhythm. The floor was a single piece of black stone so perfectly polished it looked like standing on the surface of a dark lake. At the far end of the chamber, elevated on a dais that seemed to be carved from a single massive gem, stood the Empress's throne. It was beautiful and terrible at once, a creation that spoke of power beyond imagination and the will to use it without hesitation. But it was empty. "Wait here," Commander Vextai instructed, taking position near the chamber's entrance. "The Empress will arrive shortly. You will remain standing. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will address her as Your Imperial Majesty and nothing else. Failure to observe proper protocol will result in consequences you cannot imagine." Marcus nodded, his attention already drawn to the chamber's details. The architecture was unlike anything in human records, suggesting a civilization far older than Earth's entire history. The crystals in the walls hummed with barely perceptible vibrations, and he wondered if they served some function beyond decoration. Power conduits, perhaps, or some form of data storage he couldn't comprehend. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the chamber, each one crisp and deliberate. Marcus turned toward the main entrance and felt his world tilt sideways. Empress Lyrelei entered the throne chamber like a force of nature given physical form. She moved with the fluid grace of someone absolute certain of their power, each step carrying the weight of absolute authority. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, with the elongated proportions common to her species. Her skin was pale blue-white, like moonlight on fresh snow, and her hair was a cascade of silver that seemed to move with a life of its own. But it was her face that stopped Marcus's heart. The bone structure was different, the ears pointed, the eyes larger, and an impossible shade of violet that seemed to hold depths like looking into deep space. But the expression, the way she held her head, the slight asymmetry of her smile, the way her left eyebrow arched just a fraction higher than her right when she was thinking, it was Sarah. Trust Teddy. Not Sarah exactly, not his dead wife who had been human in every detail, but Sarah nonetheless. The same intelligence in her eyes, the same presence that had always made him feel like she could see right through him, the same indefinable something that had made him fall in love with her 12 years ago and kept him loving her even 3 years after her death. The Empress stopped halfway to her throne, her violet eyes meeting his across the vast chamber. For a moment that stretched into eternity, neither of them moved. Then her composed expression cracked, just slightly, and Marcus saw something impossible flicker across her alien features. Recognition. "Commander Vextai," she spoke, her voice carrying easily through the chamber despite its normal conversational tone. "Leave us. Seal the chamber. I am not to be disturbed for any reason. Your Imperial Majesty, protocol requires that you obey your Empress without question." The temperature in her voice dropped noticeably. "Go!" The sound of the chamber door sealing echoed like a death knell. Marcus found himself alone with the most powerful being in known space. A woman who could order the destruction of entire star systems with a word, who commanded the loyalty of trillions of sentients across thousands of worlds. A woman who looked at him with Sarah's eyes. They stood in silence for long minutes, each studying the other with the intensity of scientists examining a new form of life. Finally, the Empress spoke, her voice carefully controlled but carrying an undertone Marcus couldn't identify. "What is your name, human?" "Marcus Chen, your Imperial Majesty." The formal title felt strange on his tongue, addressing someone who looked so much like the woman he'd shared morning coffee with for 8 years. Marcus Chen, she repeated, as if testing how the syllables felt. You are supposed to be extinct. So I've been told. We're apparently pretty good at surprising people by still being alive. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, and Marcus felt his chest tighten. Sarah used to smile like that when he said something she found unexpectedly amusing. Where do you come from, Marcus Chen? Originally? Earth, though, that's a story in itself. More recently, I've been working the asteroid belts in the Outer Rim, trying to make enough money to buy a better ship, and maybe find somewhere quiet to settle down. Earth. She pronounced the word like a prayer or a curse. The human homeworld. Our records indicate it was destroyed over 800 cycles ago. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Destroyed? No, Earth is fine as far as I know. I mean, I haven't been back in 15 years, but the Empress moved closer, her footsteps silent on the polished floor. When she stopped, she was close enough that Marcus could see flecks of silver in her violet eyes, close enough to catch a scent like ozone and starlight. Tell me about your wife, Marcus Chen. The question hit him like a physical blow. Marcus took a step backward, his composure finally cracking. What? How do you, Why would you ask about that? Because you look at me as if you've seen a ghost, she replied, her voice now barely above a whisper. Because when you entered this chamber, your heart rate increased by 30%, and your pupil dilation suggests profound emotional shock. Because you're staring at me like I'm someone you've lost. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to center himself, trying to find some explanation that made sense. When he opened them, she was still there, still watching him, with an expression of barely contained intensity. Her name was Sarah, he said finally. Dr. Sarah Chen, xenobiologist. She died 3 years ago in a research accident on Kepler Station. We were married for 8 years. He paused, then added quietly, You look like her. Describe her. The command was gentle but unmistakable. Marcus found himself talking, the words coming easier than they had since Sarah's death. He told the Empress about Sarah's brilliant mind, her passion for understanding alien life forms, her terrible habit of staying up all night reading research papers and then being grumpy the next morning until she had coffee. He described her laugh, her stubborn streak, the way she hummed unconsciously when she was concentrating. The Empress listened without interruption, her expression growing more complex with each detail. When Marcus finally stopped talking, she was quiet for a long moment. My consort, she said at last, was named Kellyan. He was a xenoarchaeologist, obsessed with understanding the ruins of dead civilizations. He had a theory that consciousness could transcend death, that under the right circumstances, souls could migrate between bodies, even between species. She paused. I thought it was romantic nonsense. He died 847 cycles ago, on the day we first encountered your species. His research vessel was caught in the crossfire when Earth's defense fleet engaged our scouts. Her voice remained steady, but Marcus caught the slight tremor beneath the words. I have not spoken his name aloud since that day. The implications hit Marcus like a meteor strike. 800? That's impossible. Earth didn't have spaceflight 800 years ago. We barely had steam engines. Time flows differently for different species, Marcus Chen. What you call 800 years might be far longer or far shorter than what we measure. The Empress moved even closer until she was close enough to touch. But the resemblance is impossible to ignore. You think I'm... What? Some kind of reincarnation? I think the universe has a sense of irony that borders on cruelty. She reached out slowly, her fingers hovering just short of his face. May I? Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Her touch was cool and electric, alien skin against human, but the gesture was heartbreakingly familiar. Sarah used to trace the line of his jaw exactly like that when she was trying to memorize his face. Kellyan had a scar, she whispered, her finger finding the small mark on Marcus's chin where he'd cut himself falling off his bike when he was 7. Right here, from a childhood accident, Marcus felt the world shifting around him, reality bending in ways that made no sense. I've had that scar my entire life. The Empress withdrew her hand, stepping back and composing herself with visible effort. When she spoke again, it was with the voice of someone accustomed to command, but Marcus could hear the uncertainty beneath. You will remain aboard this ship as my guest, not my prisoner. Quarters will be prepared for you adjacent to the royal suite. We have much to discuss, Marcus Chen. Much to understand. Your Imperial Majesty, I appreciate the hospitality, but I should probably... That was not a request. The temperature in her voice could have frozen helium. You are the last confirmed member of an extinct species, found in circumstances that defy explanation, bearing an impossible resemblance to someone long dead. You represent a mystery that threatens to upend everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the nature of existence itself. She paused. You're not going anywhere until I have answers. Marcus looked into those violet eyes and saw something that made him nod despite every instinct screaming at him to run. Behind the imperial authority, behind the cold mask of absolute power, he saw the same desperate hope that had kept him searching for meaning in Sarah's death for 3 long years. He saw someone else who had lost everything and refused to let go. Understood, Your Imperial Majesty. Lyreley, she said quietly. When we are alone, you may call me Lyreley. The name felt right on his tongue, though he couldn't say why. As guards arrived to escort him to his new quarters, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his simple mining expedition had just become something far more complicated and dangerous than he'd ever imagined. Behind him, Empress Lyreley stood alone in her throne chamber, staring at the place where he'd been, wondering if the dead could truly return, and if she was strong enough to survive the answer. The quarters assigned to Marcus were larger than his entire mining ship had been. The main chamber featured a viewport that stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a view of space that would have been breathtaking under different circumstances. Now, watching the stars stream past as the massive dreadnought traveled at speeds that defied human understanding, Marcus felt only a profound sense of displacement. 3 days had passed since his meeting with Empress Lyreley, and he'd seen her only once since then. A brief encounter in a corridor where she'd acknowledged him with a formal nod before continuing on with her entourage. But her presence seemed to permeate every moment of his existence aboard the ship. The crew treated him with a mixture of curiosity and deference that suggested his status had been clearly communicated throughout the vessel. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry. Marcus looked up from the alien text he'd been attempting to decode, one of several data tablets that had been provided for his education about Zephyrian culture and history. "Enter," he called, expecting one of the servants who brought his meals. Instead, a figure in the distinctive robes of the Imperial Medical Corps stepped through the door. Dr. Zalandra was ancient even by Zephyrian standards, her scaled skin bearing the deep blue-green hue that indicated extreme age. Her eyes held the keen intelligence of someone who had spent centuries unraveling the mysteries of biology. "Human Marcus Chen," she greeted him with the formal tone all Zephyrians seemed to use when addressing him. "I trust you are adapting well to your accommodations. They're very comfortable, thank you. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about why the Empress's personal physician would want to see me." Dr. Zalandra moved into the room with the careful steps of someone whose joints had seen too many years. She carried a medical scanning device that hummed softly with contained energy. "Her Imperial Majesty has requested a comprehensive biological analysis. I am to determine your species' physiological characteristics and compare them to our existing records." She paused, her large eyes studying Marcus with scientific intensity. "I am also to investigate certain anomalies that have come to her attention." Marcus set down the data tablet. "What kind of anomalies? May I proceed with the examination?" "It is non-invasive, merely detailed scans of your cellular structure and genetic patterns." I suppose. Though I should mention that I've never been fond of doctors. Bad experiences with medical professionals poking and prodding. Something that might have been amusement flickered in the doctor's eyes. An interesting coincidence. Her Imperial Majesty's consort expressed similar sentiments about medical examinations. Most unusual for a scientist. The scanning device projected a field of soft blue light that played across Marcus's body. He felt nothing, but the device's readouts began displaying information in the flowing script of the Zephyrian language. Fascinating, Dr. Gian, Zelandra murmured. Her attention focused entirely on the scanner. Your cellular structure is remarkably similar to Zephyrian physiology, despite the obvious external differences. Bone density, muscle composition, neural pathway configuration, all within expected parameters for our species. That seems unlikely. Humans and Zephyrians evolved on completely different worlds. Quote, indeed. Yet the similarities extend beyond mere coincidence. She adjusted the scanner's settings. Your genetic structure contains sequences that should not exist in a naturally evolved species, markers that suggest deliberate modification, though of a type I have never seen before. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. Modified how? Unknown. But I can tell you this. These modifications appear to be ancient, encoded into your genetic structure at the deepest level. They are not recent additions, but part of your fundamental biological makeup. The scanner emitted a soft beep, and Dr. Zelandra's expression changed. Her eyes widened, and she recalibrated the device twice before reading the display again. This is impossible, she whispered. What? What did you find? The doctor looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed scientific wonder with profound unease. Your neural patterns, the quantum resonance signature of your consciousness itself. It matches patterns in our imperial archives, patterns that should not exist in any living being. Whose patterns? Dr. Zelandra's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Kellyan of the House of Stars, the Empress's dead consort. The quantum signature of his consciousness is identical to yours. The room seemed to spin around Marcus. He sat down heavily on the nearest chair, his mind struggling to process what he'd just heard. That's not possible. Consciousness doesn't transfer between people. That's fantasy, not science, is it? The doctor approached him slowly, her scanner still active. Tell me, Marcus Chen, do you dream? Of course I dream. Everyone dreams. What do you dream of? Marcus hesitated. His dreams had been strange lately, filled with images that made no sense, cities of crystal and light that he'd never seen, landscapes under alien stars, conversations in languages he didn't know but somehow understood. I dream of places I've never been, he admitted, things I've never seen. Sometimes I dream of, he stopped, unable to continue. Of what, Marcus Chen? Of her, of the Empress. But not as she is now. Different, younger maybe, or just different. We talk about things that don't make sense. Archaeological discoveries, theories about ancient civilizations. I know things in these dreams that I have no way of knowing. Dr. Zelandra nodded slowly. Kellyan was the foremost expert on pre-space Zephyrian archaeology. His theories about consciousness transfer were considered revolutionary, though ultimately unproven. She paused. Until now. The implications crashed over Marcus like a tide. You're saying I'm him? That I'm somehow the reincarnation of her dead husband? I am saying that the evidence suggests something far more complex than reincarnation. Your genetic modifications, your neural patterns, even your cellular structure all point to the same conclusion. You are not merely similar to Kellyan. In some fundamental way, you are Kellyan. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the viewport. The stars offered no answers, only an infinite expanse of questions. This is insane. I'm human. I was born on Earth, raised by human parents, lived a human life. I married a human woman and watched her die. That's my reality. not some alien love story from 800 years ago. Yet you cannot deny the evidence, Dr. Zalandra said gently. Your very existence challenges everything we thought we knew about life and death, about the nature of consciousness itself. What does the Empress think about all this? The doctor's expression grew troubled. Her Imperial Majesty has not spoken of it directly, but her behavior since your arrival has been unusual. She has canceled all public audiences, postponed a state visit to the Centauri sector, and spends hours alone in the archive chambers, accessing records that have been sealed for centuries. Marcus turned from the viewport. What kind of records? Personal files, private communications, research notes, everything connected to Kellyan's work and their life together. Dr. Zalandra's voice carried a note of concern. She has not eaten properly in 3 days, and her sleep patterns suggest significant distress. Her Imperial Majesty is not accustomed to uncertainty, yet your presence has introduced variables she cannot control or understand. The knowledge that his presence was causing the Empress distress sat heavily in Marcus's chest. Despite the impossibility of their situation, despite the gulf of species and status between them, he felt responsible for her pain. Can I see her? Talk to her? That decision is not mine to make. However, the doctor glanced toward the door, then back at Marcus. Her Imperial Majesty often visits the memorial gardens during the night cycle. They were created to honor Kellyan's memory. Perhaps, if one were to take a late evening walk, Marcus understood the hint. Doctor, assuming for a moment that all this is true, what does it mean? What am I supposed to do with this information? Doctor, Zalandra began packing her equipment. That, human Marcus Chen, is a question that may determine the fate of empires. The Empress has shaped the galaxy through sheer force of will for over 8 centuries. She has never shown weakness, never allowed personal feelings to influence policy, never permitted herself the luxury of hope. She paused. If she begins to believe that death is not final, that lost love can be recovered, it will change everything about how she rules, how she thinks, how she sees the universe itself. After the doctor left, Marcus stood alone with thoughts that seemed too large for his mind to contain. He tried to remember his life before Sarah's death, tried to recall childhood memories that felt distinctly human. But the dreams were getting stronger, more vivid. Images of a life that felt real despite being impossible. A life where he had been someone else, somewhere else, someone else. The memorial gardens were located in the ship's central section, a vast space that simulated natural daylight despite being surrounded by the void of space. Marcus found them easily, following corridors that felt familiar despite the fact he'd never walked them before. The garden was beautiful in an alien way, filled with plants from dozens of worlds arranged in patterns that spoke of deliberate design. Crystal formations rose from beds of silver sand, each one pulsing with soft light that painted the exotic foliage in shifting colors. At the garden's center stood a monument unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It rose 30 feet into the air, a spiral of crystallized energy that seemed to contain moving lights like trapped stars. At its base, carved in flowing Zephyrian script, was writing that his eyes somehow translated automatically. Kellyan of the House of Stars. Beloved consort, brilliant mind, irreplaceable soul. Though the stars grow cold and the universe fades, love endures beyond all boundaries of time and space. Marcus stood before the monument for a long time, feeling emotions that had no source he could identify. Grief that wasn't his. Loss! That belonged to someone else. Loss! That belonged to someone else. Loss! Loss! You read Zephyrian now. The voice came from behind him, soft but unmistakable. Marcus turned to find Empress Lyrelay standing at the garden's entrance, no longer wearing the formal robes of state but a simple dress that somehow made her seem more alien and more familiar at the same time. I don't know how, Marcus admitted, but yes, I can read it. I can understand it as clearly as English. She approached slowly, her bare feet silent on the garden's pathways. In this setting, without the trappings of imperial power, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Kellyan could read 17 languages by the time he was 20 cycles old. He had a gift for linguistics that my finest scholars envied. She stopped beside the monument, her fingers tracing the carved words. I wrote this inscription myself. The palace poets offered hundreds of variations, but none captured what I wanted to say. What did you want to say? Lyrelay looked at him, and Marcus saw tears gathering in her violet eyes. That losing him broke something in me that could never be repaired. That in the 8th century since his death I have loved no one and nothing except the empire we built together. That I turned myself into stone because flesh and blood hurt too much. Marcus moved closer, drawn by the pain in her voice. I'm sorry. For your loss, for the confusion my presence is causing. For everything. Are you? She stepped back, her expression hardening slightly. Or are you apologizing for abandoning me 8 centuries ago when you died in the crossfire of a war I started? The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. I'm not him, Lyrelay. I can't be responsible for decisions made by someone who died before Earth had spaceflight. Can't you? Her voice rose slightly. Doctor, Zelandra shared her findings with me. The quantum signature of your consciousness, the genetic modifications, the memories that bleed through in your dreams. If you are not Kellyan, then explain the impossible coincidence of your existence. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration that made Lyrelay's breath catch. Kellyan had made the exact same movement when wrestling with difficult concepts. I don't know what I am, Marcus said finally. I remember being human. I remember growing up on Earth, meeting Sarah, building a life that had nothing to do with empires or dead archaeologists. But I also dream of places I've never been and know things I've never learned. I look at you and feel... He stopped, unable to finish. Feel what? Marcus met her eyes, seeing in them a desperate need for truth despite the pain it might bring. Love. I look at you and feel love that isn't mine, didn't come from my experiences, but exists anyway. I want to comfort you for a loss I didn't cause, apologize for a death that wasn't my fault. When you touch me, it feels like coming home to a place I've never been. Lyrelay moved closer, her hand reaching out to touch his face again. This time she didn't hesitate, her cool fingers tracing the familiar lines of his features. Kellyan used to say that consciousness was like water, able to take any shape but retaining its essential nature regardless of the container. He theorized that under extreme circumstances, during moments of profound trauma or love, consciousness could transcend physical death and find new forms of existence. You think the trauma of his death somehow transferred his consciousness into me? I think you are asking the wrong question, Lyrelay said softly. The question is not whether you are Kellyan reborn. The question is whether it matters. Marcus stared at her, trying to understand. Of course it matters. If I'm not really me, if I'm just some cosmic accident wearing a dead man's soul, then you are still you, she interrupted. Your memories of Earth, your love for Sarah, your experiences as Marcus Chen, all of that is real, regardless of what else you might be. Consciousness is not a simple thing, easily defined or contained. Perhaps you are both. Perhaps you have always been both. The idea was staggering in its implications. Marcus felt his sense of identity shifting, expanding to accommodate possibilities he'd never considered. Lyrelay, even if that's true, what does it mean for us? I'm human, you're Empress of the galaxy. I mine asteroids for a living, you command the loyalty of trillions of beings. How do we bridge that gap? For the first time since he'd met her, Lyrelay smiled without reservation, expression of pure joy that transformed her alien features into something achingly beautiful. The same way we bridged it 8 centuries ago, she said. One day at a time, one conversation at a time, one shared moment at a time. Love does not recognize species barriers. Marcus Chen, who is also Kellyan of the House of Stars. Love recognizes only itself. As they stood together in the memorial garden, surrounded by the light of artificial stars and the memory of love that refused to die, Marcus felt the last of his resistance crumble. Whatever he was, wherever he had come from, he was here now, with her. And perhaps that was enough to begin building something new from the ashes of something lost. The Imperial Archive stretched through 17 levels of the ZES Dominion, containing the collected knowledge of 1,000 conquered civilization. Marcus walked beside Lyrelay through corridors lined with crystalline data storage units, each one containing more information than entire human libraries. The soft blue glow emanating from the archives created an almost ethereal atmosphere, like moving through crystallized dreams. 2 weeks had passed since their conversation in the memorial garden, and Marcus had been granted unprecedented access to Imperial resources. Officially, he was researching human history to help establish diplomatic protocols should other surviving humans be discovered. Unofficially, everyone aboard the ship understood that the Empress's mysterious guest had become something far more significant than a simple refugee. The records from Kellyan's final expedition are sealed in Archive Level 12, Lyrelay explained as they descended through a transport tube that moved with silent efficiency. I have not accessed them since the day I learned of his death. Perhaps it is time to understand what really happened. Marcus studied her profile as they traveled. The past 2 weeks had brought subtle changes to the Empress. Her rigid posture had softened slightly, and she smiled more often, though still rarely. The crew had noticed, too. Commander Vextai had mentioned to Marcus that her Imperial Majesty seemed more approachable, more willing to consider alternatives to her usual direct approach to problem-solving. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Marcus asked. "Some memories might be better left undisturbed." "Spoken like Kellyan," Lyrelay replied with a slight smile. "He was always trying to protect me from unpleasant truths. But I am no longer the young idealist who believed love could conquer any obstacle. I have ruled an empire for 8 centuries. I can face whatever we find in those records." The transport deposited them in a section of the archives that felt different from the rest. Here, the walls were darker, the crystalline storage units arranged in more intimate configurations. Personal collections, Marcus realized. The private records of the Imperial family. Lyrelay approached a storage unit that stood apart from the others, its surface bearing the symbol of the House of Stars. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed her palms on the access panels, and Marcus fought the urge to offer comfort. This was something she needed to do alone. The unit responded to her touch, its surface becoming transparent to reveal hundreds of data crystals arranged in precise patterns. Lyrelay selected one, her movements careful and deliberate, then moved to a nearby viewing station. "Kellyan's personal log," she said quietly. "The last entries before the expedition to Earth." The viewing station projected a holographic display showing a figure that made Marcus's breath catch. The man in the recording looked exactly like Marcus might have had he been born Zephyrian. Same bone structure, same eyes, even the same habit of running his hand through his hair when thinking. "Personal log, stardate 48473. The figure spoke in Zephyrian, though Marcus found he could understand every word. "Tomorrow we depart for the Sol system to make first contact with the species the Scouts have designated humans. Lyrelay opposes the mission, arguing that any species capable of developing spaceflight could pose a future threat to the Empire. She may be right, but my archaeological instincts tell me there is something special about this world, something that connects to the ancient ruins we've discovered throughout this sector of space." Lyrelay paused the recording. "We had our worst argument ever about that mission. I wanted to send a military expedition to assess human capabilities and determine whether they needed to be contained. Kellyan insisted on a peaceful approach. He sounds like he was trying to prevent exactly what happened," Marcus observed. "Continue watching." The recording resumed, showing Kellyan pacing in what appeared to be his private study. Behind him, Marcus could see star charts and artifact displays that looked hauntingly familiar. I have been reviewing the quantum resonance patterns we detected from the human homeworld, Kellyan continued. The signatures are unlike anything we have encountered before. They suggest not just intelligence, but consciousness of a type that may be fundamentally compatible with our own neural structures. The implications are staggering. If my theories about consciousness transfer are correct, humans may represent the missing link in understanding how awareness itself transcends physical limitations.
Marcus felt a chill run down his spine.
He was studying consciousness transfer before he ever met humans. This wasn't a result of his death. It was something he was already investigating. Lyrele nodded grimly. Kellyan was obsessed with the idea that consciousness could survive physical death. It was part of his archaeological research. The ancient ruins throughout this sector all show evidence of civilizations that believed in some form of consciousness preservation. She advanced the recording to a later entry. This time, Kellyan looked troubled, his usual scholarly excitement replaced by concern. Personal log, stardate 484715. We have established orbit around the human homeworld. Initial observations confirm my worst fears. The humans are not merely intelligent, they are something far more significant. Their neural development shows signs of artificial enhancement, modifications that match patterns we have found in the ancient ruins. Someone or something guided human development, shaped their consciousness to serve a specific purpose. But who and why? The recording shifted to show data displays that made Marcus's head spin. Genetic patterns, neural mapping, quantum resonance signatures, all comparing human and Zephyrian physiology in ways that suggested deep connections between the species. Look at this data, Lyrele said, pausing on a particularly complex display. Kellyan discovered that humans and Zephyrians share genetic markers that should be impossible given our separate evolutionary paths. Our species were designed to be compatible. Designed by whom? That was the question Kellyan died trying to answer. The final recording showed Kellyan preparing for what would be his last mission. He looked directly into the camera, his expression serious and determined. Personal log, final entry, before planetary survey. I have made a decision that may cost me everything, including Lyrele's love. The quantum resonance readings from the human homeworld suggest that consciousness transfer is not only possible but may be actively occurring on a planetary scale. If I am right, then human consciousness represents something unprecedented, awareness that can exist independently of physical form. To test my theories, I am going to attempt something that violates every principle of scientific ethics I hold sacred. The recording paused as Kellyan moved out of frame, then returned carrying a device Marcus didn't recognize. I have constructed a quantum consciousness mapper designed to create a resonance link between my awareness and whatever force is guiding human development. If my theories are correct, this will allow me to transfer aspects of my consciousness into the quantum field surrounding Earth, where it may find compatible hosts among the human population. Marcus stared at the recording in growing horror. He deliberately transferred his consciousness. This wasn't an accident. This was an experiment, Lyrele said, her voice cold with old anger. One he conducted without telling me, without considering the consequences, without thinking about what it would mean for our empire or our relationship. The recording continued with Kellyan activating the device, his image flickering as exotic energies played around him. If this works, if consciousness can truly transcend death, then love itself becomes immortal. Lyrele, my beloved Empress, if you are viewing this recording, then something has gone wrong with the mission. But do not grieve for me. Look for me among the humans. I will find a way to return to you, even if it takes centuries. The recording ended abruptly, leaving Marcus and Lyrele in heavy silence. The implications of what they had witnessed crashed over Marcus like a wave. His existence wasn't a cosmic accident or mystical reincarnation. It was the result of a deliberate scientific experiment conducted by a man desperate to prove that love could survive death. He planned this, Marcus said finally. He knew he might die, so he made arrangements to survive through consciousness transfer. He abandoned me, Lyrelai replied bitterly. He chose his theories over his responsibilities, his experiments over his empire, his scientific curiosity over my feelings. But he came back. I'm here, we're here, together. Doesn't that prove his theories were right? Lyrelai turned to face him, her violet eyes blazing with emotions too complex to name. Are you really Kellyan returned to me? Or are you Marcus Chen possessed by the consciousness of a dead man? How do I know which thoughts are yours and which are his? How do I know if your feelings for me are genuine or just programmed responses from transferred memories? The questions cut deep because Marcus had been asking them himself. The dreams were getting stronger, memories of a life he'd never lived becoming more vivid than his actual experiences. Sometimes he would catch himself using Zephyrian phrases he'd never learned, understanding cultural references that should be meaningless to a human. The boundary between Marcus and Kellyan was blurring in ways that frightened him. I don't know, he admitted. Some days I feel completely human, remembering Earth and Sarah and everything that made me who I am. Other days I look at you and remember things that can't be my memories. Conversations we never had, places we never went together, moments of intimacy that belonged to someone else. And which is real? Which is the true you? Marcus moved closer to her, seeing his own confusion reflected in her alien features. Maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real question is, does it matter? If I love you now, in this moment, with whatever combination of consciousness I possess, isn't that enough to build something new? You sound like him, Lyrelai said with a sad smile. Kellyan always believed that love was the one force in the universe that could overcome any obstacle, transcend any limitation. I thought it was naive romanticism. Do you still think that? Lyrelai reached out to touch his face, her cool fingers tracing the features she had memorized centuries ago. I think that consciousness may be more fluid than we ever imagined. I think that you are both Marcus Chen and Kellyan of the House of Stars, and something entirely new as well. I think that love may indeed be the force that shapes reality itself. A soft chime interrupted the moment, indicating an urgent communication. Lyrelai activated her personal communicator with obvious reluctance. Your Imperial Majesty. Commander Vextai's voice carried notes of excitement and concern. We have received a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. They are requesting immediate audience regarding what they term the human situation. It appears word of Marcus Chen's presence has reached the other empires. Lyrelai's expression hardened. The vulnerable woman replaced instantly by the Imperial Empress. How? Security around Marcus's presence was classified at the highest levels. Unknown, Your Majesty. But the Council is demanding explanations about what they call proof of consciousness transfer technology and its implications for galactic security. Marcus felt cold dread settling in his chest. What does this mean? It means, Lyrelai said grimly, that our private reunion is about to become a matter of galactic politics. The other empires fear consciousness transfer technology because it would fundamentally alter the balance of power. If they believe I have access to such capabilities, they'll try to stop you, Marcus finished, even if it means war. Commander Vextai, Lyrelai spoke into her communicator, set course for the Galactic Council chambers, maximum velocity, and prepare the fleet for potential conflict. Your Majesty, surely diplomacy. The time for diplomacy ended the moment they learned about Marcus, Lyrelai interrupted. Now we face a choice: surrender the greatest scientific discovery in galactic history to prevent war, or defend our right to unlock the secrets of consciousness itself. She turned to Marcus, her expression resolute but tinged with regret. I am sorry, my love. I had hoped we would have more time to understand what you are, what we are together. But the galaxy has other plans. Marcus took her hand in his, feeling the strange comfort of alien skin against human. Whatever happens, we face it together. Marcus and Lyrelai, Kellyan and Lyrelai, whoever we are, we face it as one. Together, she agreed. though I fear the galaxy may not survive what we have rediscovered. As the ZS Dominion changed course toward the Galactic Council chambers, accelerating to speeds that bent space itself, Marcus wondered if love truly was strong enough to overcome the fear and jealousy of empires. Soon, they would find out if consciousness transferred across death could also transfer hope to a galaxy balanced on the edge of war. The Galactic Council chamber was a marvel of engineering that had taken 3 centuries to construct, a massive station positioned at the gravitational center point between 5 major empires. Its central chamber could accommodate representatives from hundreds of species, each provided with environmental controls suited to their biological needs. Today, that chamber thrummed with tension that had been building for the 3 weeks since the Council had summoned Empress Lyreley to explain the human situation. Marcus stood beside the Empress on the Zephyrian delegation platform, trying not to let his nervousness show. Around them, representatives from dozens of species watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The atmosphere was charged with the kind of energy that preceded either breakthrough negotiations or devastating wars. The platform directly across from them held the Andromedean delegation, led by High Chancellor Vortak, whose crystalline body pulsed with patterns of light that Marcus had learned indicated extreme agitation. To their left, the biomechanical representatives of the Synthetic Consortium clicked and hummed in their artificial languages. The aquatic hydrants occupied a specialized tank on the right, their tentacled forms moving in the fluid patterns of their species' communication method. But it was the platform behind them that drew Marcus's attention most. The Terran Federation's delegation was small, just 3 humans in the formal dress uniforms of Earth's diplomatic corps. Their presence here should have been impossible. According to every record Marcus had seen, Earth had been destroyed 8 centuries ago. Ambassador Sarah Martinez, the lead human representative, bore no physical resemblance to Sarah Chen, but something in her demeanor, her way of holding herself, reminded Marcus painfully of his dead wife. When their eyes met across the chamber, he saw recognition that shouldn't exist. The Terran delegation was quite insistent on being present for these proceedings. Lyreley had told him before the session began. They claim Earth has been in hiding for 8 centuries, developing in secret, while the galaxy believed them extinct. Their technology appears to be far more advanced than our records suggested possible. Chancellor Vortak's voice resonated through the chamber with the harmonic frequencies his species used for formal address. We are gathered to address a threat to galactic stability unlike any we have faced. The Zephyrian Empire claims to possess technology that can transfer consciousness between bodies, potentially between species. If true, this represents a fundamental violation of the natural order and a weapon of unimaginable power. Lyreley activated her own platform's address system, her voice carrying the authority of 8 centuries of rule. The Galactic Council summons me to explain natural phenomena that challenge our understanding of consciousness itself. I am here not as a defendant, but as a fellow seeker of truth. Natural phenomena? High Chancellor Vortak's crystalline form flared brighter. You claim that the human standing beside you is somehow both Marcus Chen of Earth and Kellyan of your ancient house of stars? That consciousness can transcend death and inhabit new forms? Such claims demand extraordinary proof. Before Lyreley could respond, Ambassador Martinez activated the Terran platform systems. Perhaps we can provide some context that your lordships lack. The chamber fell silent. It was unprecedented for a minor delegation to speak without being formally recognized, but the mystery surrounding Earth's survival had captured everyone's attention. The human homeworld was not destroyed 8 centuries ago, Martinez continued. Earth chose isolation after first contact with the Zephyrian Empire resulted in the death of their archaeologist, Kellyan of the House of Stars. We had detected his consciousness transfer experiment and recognized it for what it was. Proof that awareness itself could transcend physical limitations. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. The implications of what she was saying crashed over him like an avalanche. Earth has spent the last 8 centuries studying consciousness transfer, not as a weapon, but as a natural evolutionary step. We have discovered that under certain conditions, consciousness can indeed migrate between compatible biological systems. The man you call Marcus Chen is not unique. He is one of thousands. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species activated their communication systems simultaneously, creating a cacophony of alien languages and alarm calls. Chancellor Vortax's form blazed with light patterns that hurt to look at directly. Order! The voice belonged to the council's presiding judge, an ancient being from a species so old they had no name, only a designation, the First. Ambassador Martinez, you are claiming that consciousness transfer is not only possible but actively practiced by your species. Yes, Your Honor. Earth has become something unprecedented, a world where consciousness is understood to be independent of physical form. What you perceive as a threat, we recognize as the next stage of galactic evolution. Lyreley stepped forward, her expression mixing shock with growing understanding. You knew. Earth knew about Kellyan's experiment from the beginning. We detected the quantum consciousness signature the moment it entered our solar system, Martinez confirmed. Kellyan's awareness merged with our planetary consciousness field and found compatible hosts among our population. Marcus Chen was born 18 months later, carrying genetic modifications that allowed him to host both human and Zephyrian consciousness patterns. Marcus found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. Are you saying I'm not real? That I'm some kind of designed container for an alien mind? Martinez looked at him with something approaching sympathy. You are real Marcus Chen. Your memories, your love for Sarah, your experiences as a human being, all of that is genuine. But you are also something more. You are proof that consciousness can evolve beyond the limitations of single species, single bodies, single lifetimes. The Andromedan delegation's platform erupted in patterns of light that translated as outrage. This is an abomination, Chancellor Vortax declared. You speak of consciousness as if it were some common resource to be transferred at will. You violate the fundamental principles of individual identity and species integrity. Do we? The question came from an unexpected source. Dr. Zalandra had accompanied the Zephyrian delegation as a scientific advisor, and now she stepped forward with the authority of one who had spent centuries studying the mysteries of life itself. I have examined Marcus Chen extensively, she continued. His consciousness patterns show perfect integration between human and Zephyrian neural structures. There is no conflict. No forced overlay of one identity upon another. Instead, there is synthesis, a merging that has created something greater than the sum of its parts. Synthesis or corruption demanded a representative from the synthetic consortium, its mechanical voice devoid of inflection. Our civilization is built on the principle that consciousness belongs to its original form. To suggest otherwise threatens the foundation of all social order. Marcus looked around the chamber, seeing fear and confusion in alien faces, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. These beings were terrified of what he represented, not because it was evil, but because it challenged everything they thought they knew about life, death, and identity itself. May I speak? He asked, his voice carrying through the chamber's communication system. The first gestured with one impossibly ancient appendage. The subject of our inquiry may indeed address the council. Marcus took a breath, feeling the eyes of the galaxy upon him. You want to know what it's like to be me? To be both Marcus Chen and Kellyan of the House of Stars? It's like looking at a hologram that shows different images depending on the angle of view. Sometimes I remember growing up on Earth, learning to ride a bicycle, meeting Sarah in graduate school. Other times I remember Zephyrian cities, archaeological expeditions, falling in love with an Empress who could command the loyalty of worlds. He paused, seeing that he had their attention. But here's what I've learned. Both sets of memories are real. Both lives were lived. Both loves were genuine. I'm not possessed or corrupted or artificially modified. I'm evolved. I'm what consciousness becomes when it's free to grow beyond the limits of a single existence. And what of the woman you call Sarah? Chancellor Vortak's question carried an edge that made Marcus's stomach tighten. If consciousness can transfer between bodies, between species, where is she now? Marcus felt the question like a knife to his heart. It was something he'd been wondering about since learning the truth about his nature. If Kellyan's consciousness could survive death and find him, what had happened to Sarah's? Baster Martinez answered before he could speak. Sarah Chen's consciousness signature was detected by our monitoring systems at the moment of her death 3 years ago. Like Kellyan's, it found a compatible host. She gestured to her delegation, and one of the other human representatives stepped forward. A woman, tall and elegant, with kind eyes and a smile that made Marcus's heart stop. "Hello, Marcus," she said, and it was Sarah's voice, Sarah's way of saying his name. "I've been looking for you for 3 years." The chamber erupted again, but Marcus heard none of it. He stared across the space between their platforms, seeing Sarah's consciousness looking back at him from an unfamiliar but somehow perfect face. The woman was younger than Sarah had been, with different hair, different features, but the same essential awareness that had made him fall in love all those years ago. "This is impossible," Lyrelay said beside him, but her voice lacked conviction. "The probability of 2 consciousness transfers finding each other across space and time is exactly what you would expect," Dr. Zilandra said with growing excitement. "If consciousness operates according to quantum entanglement principles, linked awareness naturally seeks reunion regardless of physical separation or death." Marcus felt the universe reshaping itself around him once again. Not only was he the reincarnation of an alien archaeologist, but his dead wife had somehow found her way back to life in another body, on another world, in another time. "Sarah?" he called across the chamber. She smiled, and it was like sunrise after the longest night. "It's me, Marcus. It's really me. And we have so much to tell you about what's really happening to the galaxy." The first raised multiple appendages for silence. "These revelations require careful consideration. We adjourn for deliberation. All parties will remain available for further questioning." As the various delegations began filing out of the chamber, Marcus found himself caught between 2 impossible loves. Lyrelay, who had waited 8 centuries for her husband's return, and Sarah, who had apparently crossed death itself to find him. But the bigger question loomed over everything else. If consciousness transfer was real, if awareness could survive death and evolve beyond species boundaries, what did it mean for the future of galactic civilization? And what was Earth's real agenda in revealing these secrets now? Looking at the 2 women who represented the most important loves of his combined existence, Marcus realized that his personal confusion was nothing compared to the storm about to engulf the galaxy. The trial was just beginning, and the verdict might determine whether consciousness would evolve or whether the fear of change would destroy everything. The private meeting chamber aboard the council station was smaller than the Grand Assembly Hall, but its intimate proportions only intensified the emotional weight of the gathering. Marcus sat across from Sarah and Lyrelay, 3 beings whose love story had somehow become the focal point of galactic politics. Dr. Zilandra and Ambassador Martinez completed the circle, representing the scientific and political implications of what they'd discovered. 2 days had passed since the dramatic revelations in the council chamber, and the various delegations were locked in heated debate about the future of consciousness transfer technology. But Marcus found himself focused on more immediate concerns. Understanding how his heart could hold love for 2 different women who somehow represented the same impossible relationship across space and time. "The quantum entanglement between paired consciousness signatures is stronger than we initially theorized," Dr. Zilandra was saying. Her scanning equipment spread across the table between them. "When I examine the 3 of you together, the resonance patterns are extraordinary. Marcus carries both Kellyan and Marcus patterns. Sarah hosts both Sarah and a previously unknown signature that appears to be connected to ancient Zephyrian royal lineages." Lyrelay leaned forward, her violet eyes intense. "What kind of royal lineage?" I'm still analyzing the data, but the patterns suggest consciousness transfer has been occurring naturally for millennia, far longer than we suspected. Sarah's consciousness appears to carry memories from multiple previous incarnations, including what may be Zephyrian nobility from the early days of the Empire. Sarah, who had been silent for most of the meeting, finally spoke. I remember things I shouldn't remember. Not just Earth memories, but flashes of crystal cities, court ceremonies, scientific discoveries spanning thousands of years. She looked at Lirelei. I remember loving you, though that makes no sense at all. The admission hung in the air like a charged particle field. Marcus felt his understanding of identity and love expanding beyond anything he'd thought possible. The consciousness we call Sarah may have been reincarnating through compatible hosts for millennia, Ambassador Martinez explained. Earth's monitoring systems have tracked similar patterns throughout human history. What you call soulmates may actually be consciousness signatures naturally seeking reunion across multiple lifetimes. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache that had nothing to do with physical discomfort. So what you're telling me is that Sarah and I have been finding each other over and over again across different species and different lives for thousands of years? Not just you and Sarah, Dr. Zalandra said quietly. All three of you. The quantum signatures suggest a three-way entanglement that has been seeking resolution for millennia. Marcus Kellyan, Sarah's multi-incarnate consciousness, and Lirelei herself appear to be part of the same consciousness cluster. Lirelei stood abruptly, moving to the chamber's viewport to stare out at the stars. You're suggesting that my love for Kellyan, Marcus's love for Sarah, and whatever connection exists between Sarah and myself are all part of some cosmic pattern of consciousness-seeking reunion? I'm suggesting, Dr. Zalandra replied carefully, that love itself may be a quantum force that transcends individual existence. That what we call romance and partnership may actually be consciousness recognizing its own missing pieces. The implications were staggering. Marcus looked between the two women who had shaped his existence in different lives and felt something shift in his understanding of what love could be. If this is true, he said slowly, then the question isn't who I love or which life is real. The question is, what are we supposed to do with this knowledge? Before anyone could answer, the chamber's communication system activated with an emergency tone. Commander Vextai's voice filled the room, tight with barely controlled alarm. Your Imperial Majesty, urgent message from the Andromedan fleet. Chancellor Vortak is demanding immediate surrender of all consciousness transfer research and the permanent confinement of the human subjects. He claims the technology represents an existential threat to galactic civilization and must be contained by force if necessary. Marcus felt cold dread settle in his stomach. How many ships does he have? 47 Andropates with support vessels from the Synthetic Consortium and 3 minor empires, Vextai replied. They've formed a blockade around the council station. No one leaves until their demands are met. Lyrelei's expression hardened into the mask of absolute authority Marcus had first seen in her throne room. How long until our fleet arrives? 18 hours, Your Majesty. But we are significantly outnumbered. Sarah stood, her face pale but determined. There may be another option. The Terran Federation didn't come to these negotiations alone. We've been preparing for this possibility for centuries. Ambassador Martinez activated her personal communicator. Admiral Chen, please respond. The holographic projection that materialized in the chamber showed a figure that made Marcus's breath catch. The man was clearly human, but his bearing and the symbols of rank on his uniform suggested authority that transcended anything Marcus had ever seen in human space. Admiral Chen reporting, Ambassador, the fleet stands ready. Admiral, Martinez said formally, I present Marcus Chen, carrier of the Kellyan consciousness pattern. Marcus, this is Admiral David Chen, your descendant, 14 generations removed. Marcus stared at the hologram in shock. The family resemblance was unmistakable. But more than that, he recognized something in the Admiral's eyes. The same consciousness signature he'd been feeling in his dreams, the same quantum resonance that connected him to Kellyan. My descendant? Earth has been tracking consciousness transfer patterns for 8 centuries, Admiral Chen explained. Your bloodline carries genetic modifications that make it particularly compatible with transferred consciousness. Several of us carry different aspects of the Kellyan pattern, inherited and evolved through natural reproduction. Several? 47 ships? Admiral Chen said with a slight smile that was achingly familiar, each commanded by a direct descendant of Marcus and Sarah Chen, each carrying aspects of the original consciousness patterns that started this whole evolutionary process. Teddy. Lyreley moved closer to the holographic display. You're saying that Marcus and Sarah have descendants commanding a hidden human fleet? More than that, Sarah said quietly. We've been preparing for this moment for centuries. Earth didn't just study consciousness transfer. We used it to create something unprecedented. A civilization where individual death is impossible, where knowledge and love accumulate across generations rather than being lost. You've created functional immortality. We've created functional evolution, Admiral Chen corrected. Consciousness that grows and develops beyond the limitations of single lifetimes or single bodies. The galaxy fears us because we represent what they could become if they had the courage to evolve. Commander Vextai's voice interrupted again, urgent with alarm. Your Majesty, the Andromedan fleet is powering weapons. Chancellor Vortak is demanding an immediate response to his ultimatum. Lyreley looked around the chamber, her gaze moving between Marcus, Sarah, and the holographic admiral. What do you need from me? Join us, Sarah said simply. Not as the ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, but as Lyreley, the woman who loved Kellyan enough to wait 8 centuries for his return. Help us show the galaxy that consciousness evolution isn't something to be feared, but something to be embraced. Marcus felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. Everything he had been, everything he thought he knew about love and identity and the nature of existence itself, was balanced on the edge of this moment. What happens to the Empire if you do this? He asked Lyreley. The Empire will survive, she replied with certainty. But it will change, just as I must change, just as we all must change. She turned to Dr. Zilandra. Doctor, your analysis suggests that consciousness evolution is not optional, correct? That it's already happening naturally, based on the data? The quantum entanglement between consciousness signatures is strengthening across the galaxy. What Earth has done artificially, other species are beginning to experience naturally. We can either guide the process or be overwhelmed by it. Lyreley nodded slowly, coming to a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. Admiral Chen, what do you need from the Zephyrian fleet? Just stand with us when we reveal the truth to the galaxy. Help us show them that love itself is the force driving consciousness evolution, and that fighting it will only bring suffering. The chamber fell silent as everyone absorbed the magnitude of what they were planning. Marcus looked at Sarah, seeing in her unfamiliar features the same courage that had made him love her in their previous life. Then he looked at Lyreley, seeing in her alien beauty the same strength that had sustained an empire for centuries. Together? He asked. Together, both women replied simultaneously. Admiral Chen's projection smiled, and for a moment Marcus saw his own face reflected in his descendants' features. Transmitting quantum consciousness signatures now. Every being in this system is about to experience the truth about consciousness evolution. Hold on! The wave that swept through the council station was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. For a brief moment, every consciousness in the system was connected, sharing memories and emotions and experiences across species boundaries. He felt the fear of the Andromedes, the confusion of the synthetic consortium, the wonder of the assembled representatives as they experienced firsthand what consciousness could become. But more than that, he felt love that transcended individual existence. that connected every aware being in an endless web of caring and understanding. Love that made species boundaries seem irrelevant, and death seem like just another transformation rather than an ending. When the wave passed, the communication channels erupted with voices from across the blockading fleet. Ship after ship reported the same phenomena. Crew members remembering lives they'd never lived, consciousness signatures connecting across species lines, the sudden understanding that awareness itself was far greater than anyone had imagined. Chancellor Vorthak's voice, when it finally came through the communication system, carried a different tone entirely. All ships stand down. We request immediate conference to discuss the implications of what we have just experienced. Marcus pulled both Sarah and Lyrelay close, feeling the strange completeness of love that encompassed multiple lives and multiple forms. Around them, the galaxy was taking its first steps toward a new form of existence, one where consciousness could grow beyond the boundaries of death and species. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. Marcus looked out at the stars, feeling the presence of countless consciousness signatures beginning to recognize their connections to each other, and smiled. "Now we learn what love can really accomplish when it's free to evolve." In the years that followed, the galaxy would indeed learn. Consciousness transfer became not a technology to be feared, but a natural part of existence to be celebrated. Species barriers began to break down, as beings discovered that awareness itself recognized no boundaries. Love stories like Marcus and Sarah's, Kellyanne and Lyralay's, became common as consciousness signatures found their missing pieces across vast expanses of space and time. And at the center of it all, three beings who had loved each other across multiple lives and multiple forms proved that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with weapons or politics, but with the simple recognition that love itself is the force that drives all evolution, all growth, all hope for a better future. The galaxy had indeed not survived what they rediscovered. It had become something far better than survival. It had become truly alive. He resembled her long-lost husband. Even the alien Empress was stunned. HFY Stories. Best HFY Tales.